What's up, everybody? It's Brandon from Box Office Banner Cult Flick Symposium, and I'm coming at you with yet another review. We're jumping into it, people. We're going to go through the entire Fast saga, if you will call it that, in prep for not this coming Fridays, but the following Fridays, Fast X. And if you're not about that Roman numeral life, that means 10. So we got 10 movies. Actually, 11, because I'm going to do Hobbs and Shaw, too. Buckle up. No pun intended. This franchise, I'm not a huge fan of it. It's definitely got ones in the mix of it all that I do rather enjoy to love. But there's definitely some misfires and ones that like I don't really like as much upon further viewing. And I'm kind of in the ballpark, like a lot of people are, where I do have some fatigue. But in saying that, when the original came out, and I'm not even a guy that likes fast cars or cars at all. I mean, obviously, you got to like cars, right? It's not like I walk everywhere barefoot, but I've never been the car automotive guy. I mean, I know how to put gas in it, like how bad everybody that's like big, like just car guys are just freaking like, oh my God, I'm clicking off the video. No, I mean, like, I'm not completely helpless. I can change a tire, do the basic bullshit, but I've just never really been into vehicles. And it's weird because I work for an automotive company, but it's never been my bag. Everybody's got their thing. Obviously, you're probably like, well, look at all your movies, dork. Yeah, that's what I do. That's my thing. But nevertheless, is it enjoyable? Yes. This first one has always been enjoyable to me, and it's only furthered its guilty pleasure shenanigans. And I was probably the least hyped I've ever been going into this viewing, though, after Fast 9, which I have not seen since the theater. So it's going to be interesting to see how I feel about that one this time. And I'm not going to say I love or hate that movie. I'm just going to let y'all see when it comes. But the reason why it's not cut and dry is because I could just be like, you know what, I enjoyed it, but I'm just kind of done in general with this franchise. So how would I feel about the first one as I'm having to jump back into these movies yet again? I gotta tell you, on this watch, I still love this movie. I do. And in a weird way, it had the opposite effect where I was like, man, I've just got fatigue for this franchise. This viewing actually made it almost feel like a breath of fresh air because it was like so significantly, I guess, cool to see it get back to more grounded endeavors. I was very happy with this viewing. I feel like I've just been caught up in the craziness that this franchise, because that's honestly what weighs it down. You'll see as I go on with these reviews, like, you know, right when they first started going batshit crazy with it and it was amping up the insanity amongst the franchise. It was cool, it was fun, it kind of, you know, put the motherfucking defibrillators in the franchise and brought it back to life. And it was good, but it had a shelf life. It really did. And I didn't necessarily know that at first, but after a couple of them, whether I liked every one of them or disliked every one of them going from that point onward, you know, let's call it Fast Five, where it really picked up in that category of being batshit crazy. It started to feel like, all right, I've seen this shit happen too many times. At a certain point, it became too much. When I'm watching this first one, it's just some guys racing, and you know they're into some low down dirty shit, but they're also criminals somewhat with morals. And I like how when you peel back the fabric of the movie, you get to that point, because at first you're looking at Dom Toretto and you're looking at him like, hey, Vin Diesel's got a little charisma here. He seems really into the movie. It seems like he's really trying, where in the later ones you don't necessarily feel that way. It's just family, deep breath, flex, get out of crazy insane stunt that you would never get out of. In this one, you're like, okay, dude's a douchebag probably, but you know, he's a likable douchebag. He's like that bad guy, you know, we look at Tony Soprano, dude's not a good guy, but when you're watching Tony Soprano, and I know they're nothing alike, I'm talking about just from the standpoint of like, that dude's a fuckhead, but he's awesome. When you're watching it at first and it's Dom Toretto, you don't know shit about him other than his name, you're like, this dude, you know, he's got charges. He's probably a piece of shit, but he's a cool piece of shit. You know what I mean? But like, it was awesome how as the movie went on, you found out he was so much more than that. Because I love that scene in particular when Paul Walker goes with him into his garage and he shows off the car and he's explaining everything the car means to him. And he's like, well, why haven't you drove it? He's like, it scares the shit out of me. And you get the whole backstory on why he did what he did, beating that person senseless to death to the point he couldn't even lift his arm anymore after he was done. All that really ties into the character. And honestly, from that scene forward is what makes this movie great. Everything before that, though, it's your classic early 2000s movie. It's still good. It's not bad. It's definitely a peculiar kind of taste that you might not like, but for somebody who was born in 1991 who was 10 years old when this came out and was really influenced by early 2000s nonsense, it was fucking awesome. And I do feel some of the fatigue of this movie too, because you know the shit doesn't age perfectly. But whereas other people look at it like, "Oh God, this doesn't age well," and roll their eyes, me, I'm like, "This doesn't age well," but it's my childhood. You know, it's my nostalgia. I have a strong bond with the first half of this movie too, even though it's stupid. Even Ja Rule's dumbass character, which thankfully was replaced. I like Ja Rule in this movie because I grew up liking Ja Rule, and I was like, "Oh shit, my rapper's in this movie." It was cool. Obviously, if I would have seen this when I was 26, and even if I was a Ja Rule fan at 26 or something, that's not my age now, but I'm saying random age skimming forward where I'd be old enough to know better, I'd be like, okay, stick to rapping, Ja Rule. But it works because of the nostalgia and when it came out and the age that I was. It does so well for me. All the dumb little car races, all the dumb little lines, and all the just the crew in general, which most are gone, you know, other than what's his name, Vince, terrible of names, but you know, the core crew with Lottie and Paul Walker's girl, and not Lottie, I just did a Yellow Jackets review, Letty, with her, and then of course Paul Walker's girl, Vin Diesel's sister. It's basically just them, and then you get Vince or whatever his name is, I hope it's Vince, that comes back later that Paul Walker has a beef with. But the other little people, even if one dude, Jesse, wouldn't have died because he got shot up in the movie, I don't even know if he would have came back. It's just, this was your core group, and they kind of were, you know, the same old goofy 2000s type of gang that is real disposable, that you don't care about. They even reek in terms of characters that were bad guys from this era. But again, soft spot for these type of characters, whereas most people probably not so much. The soundtrack, yeah, still super 2000s. As far as the main people in this movie, I kind of touched on Vin Diesel. Vin Diesel's, I think, really good in this movie. Like I said, he's very believable as Dom Toretto, and I wish he kind of kept the same kind of flavor as the movies went on. Paul Walker, thought he was great in this movie. I gotta say, I gotta give a quick shout out. Probably doesn't mean much to anybody, but if you see all the Bruce Lee shit back there, at least right there, there's also a big Bruce Lee mural off camera that you can't see. I might even cheat. Let me cheat a little bit there. Hold on. Bang. Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee is always, watch me not be able to get this back. Just mid-review. That's how we do shit here, right? Who cares? There's a little bit of the room, guys. But Bruce Lee, man, huge to me. They're watching Dragon, a Bruce Lee story at some point in this movie, and boy, is it amazing to see on TV. Because as the Bruce Lee fan that I am, just to see that shot, I'm like, that only made me think the crew was even cooler, right? Like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, bro, these guys are awesome. Like, they're watching Dragon, a Bruce Lee story. If you're a Bruce Lee fan, you caught them watching that on the TV, props to you. If not, that's something that might go by you, but something by me, I'm like, they're watching Dragon. That was always a big deal to me as a kid. And to think, man, Paul Walker just had to be an undercover cop. In a weird way, I've complained about this in these movies. Like, as it goes on, it's like, this is a gripe of mine, huge gripe of mine. Every bad guy in these movies becomes a part of the team no matter the bad things they've done. If you think about it, Paul Walker is kind of the bad guy, at least to our core group that we go on to love. So even he did in a weird way, if you think about it. Because the bond there is so special, you almost feel it when it comes to the end, after that little shootout scene that we're about to talk about, where they're trying to take over the trucks, because that's what they do. They try to steal shit off semi-trucks. They get into a lot of shit. When what Vince, I swear to God, that better be his name, Brandon, gets caught up. He's like all hung up, and this guy's shooting the fucking shotgun at him on that scene when Paul Walker's called in's like got lacerations on his arm. He's got a shotgun wound. He's like, this is Detective Bryant. And he's just like, hold on, what? And like, what did you just say? Just the look on Vin Diesel's face, like, you betrayed me in a weird way, dude. The bond that they had, like, you felt that hurt because these dudes do, especially in the earlier ones, or I guess the earliest one, because, you know, Vin Diesel takes a break for a couple movies other than a quick cameo in Tokyo Drift, the third one. You feel like their bromanship, if you will. Like, these dudes were like there's some people you hang out with and you're like, okay, yeah, they're all right. There's people you hang out with that just like you click with and you're like, damn, you got each other's back right away and you got a feel for them. And to have that type of betrayal where he even went with everybody in his crew and was like putting his neck out for the character of Brian, like, dude, that hurt you almost, especially watching so many times. Like, it hits a little harder each time. So I love the chemistry between them two and the way everything went down from the jump. All kicked off with that. The tune is bad, huh? No, not to Paul Walker. That little prick, dude. I'm with the bad guys in this one. I guess I have to be and we have to be because that ends up being our group of guys we roll with. But in the end, Paul Walker did come around as the cop, did he not? But yeah, that whole scene I was just kind of touching on where they're trying to do the little heist or whatever, get in that semi truck. That scene is intense, man. Like now, when you watch a scene like that in like a newer one of these movies, like one of the new Fast and Furious movies, it feels so tame. It feels so out of place. It feels terrible. It feels like some cheap trick. Like, what, man? We've seen so much more than that. Why would you put this little scene in a movie? But it remains one of the best scenes of the entire franchise in terms of like action because of what the movie around it and what it represents. Like I said, that grounded nature and how suspenseful it feels. There's actual stakes in this movie. When you go forward, it feels like everybody's a superhero, anything can happen. So like, even though, yeah, it's more flashy, more crazy, like, oh my God, how'd you do that? When you're watching a movie and it's more grounded, it feels more realistic, and you feel like anybody can actually go because you're putting yourself in that standpoint of the first time watching the original, it definitely holds more weight than a lot of the action scenes you see later on in the franchise. So I have a very special relationship with this specific scene. Probably one of my favorite, like, you know, suspenseful PG-13 style action scenes where Paul Walker and the crew is just trying to get old dude off of that truck with everything they can, going under the semi, going around it, getting ran off the road, reaching, even leaping onto the semi. It's a very powerful scene. I will say there's a lot of times the stunt doubles did not age well at all. I'm watching on like my 75-inch, you know, and it's in 4K now, so it's all pristine. I'm just looking at it, and it's just clearly some dude with blonde hair, like not anywhere near Paul Walker. But again, these are things we kind of smile at. We're like, oh my God, but not like, oh my God, dude, terrible. As you know, again, guilty pleasure movie, I look at it, I'm like, oh my God, product of its time, pretty fucking cool. And then afterwards, since we already kind of touched on Dom, you know, hearing about once fucking Paul Walker called it in that he's a cop, that whole scene, dude, I thought was really impactful where Dom went after him and then Jesse rolled up because Jesse was on some bullshit, got, what the hell is his name? The Chinese crew, all in their feelings, come riding up, do a drive-by, and of course Jesse dies. And that scene, you know what? It feels final. You know, it's not like any time when you're watching any of the later movies where you're like, okay, I don't give a shit. Like if you were watching it with like some Fast and Furious noob, they'd be like, what do you mean he's going to come back? He just had his head cut off. I'm like, bro, it's the Fast and the Furious. I don't care what happened to him. They could have put him in acid, disintegrated him. He can come back. That's the type of levels this franchise has went to. It's really jumped. It's just jumped it, man. It's jumped the shark. You just always assume somebody's going to come back, and I hate that. It's my least favorite thing in movies because I want to feel like there's pressure. I want to feel the feeling of, oh my God, this could be it. It's completely void of that as it goes on. In this, he's a minuscule-ish character. You know, you kind of attach to him because Paul Walker, when he's sitting there with him on the computer saying, like, you could have been some huge guy, like at some college somewhere, whatever it's called, MIT, whatever it is. And he's like, oh, no, I was good at math, but everything else I flunked in. What's that thing? ADD. Like, yeah, ADD, that's what it is. I have attention deficit disorder, that type of shit, which I can relate to, by the way. Good Lord. Yeah, if you can tell. But we had that little emotional moment with him, but overall, there's nothing overly special about him. But that scene holds more weight just because it feels real. It feels like, oh my God, it feels final. It's got those kind of vibes, and that's something that is so special about this movie, that it can still attain that. We lose that as it goes along, and that is a big gripe of mine. And then the ending, where Dom breaks out the car and you're like, oh shit. And me not even being into cars and, you know, whatever vehicle, as I said, like, I still get hyped when he's revving that engine and he hikes the car up, pops a wheelie, and they're just going full speed, dude. Barely missed that train. They look at each other and bang, hits the semi. Dom flips. You could even argue, how the fuck does he survive this? This was the start of it, because it's almost like every other movie is like, well, Dom survived that. That's the worst thing it could have done. People do have miracle-esque things happen to them. There's people that have been shot a bunch and they live. It's not likely, and you want to call bullshit. Crazy things happen to people and they live. I would not say he would live from that at all, ever. But you can at least be like, well, crazy things have happened, and then we can move on. It's almost like the people that made these movies saw that scene and they were like, well, we got away with it in the first one, let's keep it going. So they fucked it up. Nevertheless, Dom is alive. He's like, it's not what I had in mind. That always makes me laugh. Can't lie. And Mr. Paul to the Wizalker is just like, hey, I owe you a 10-second car. Love that. Mutual respect and ending to this movie. Didn't need to do much more than that. That's it. This movie is still great to me. Love it. Love it. I normally say my rating, but since I'm going to do a ranking at the end of all this, I'm going to wait. I'm going to hold off on that. That way, if you're watching these videos, you can't piece together like, okay, this one will be like that. Just know that this one does get a thumbs up. I love it. It's a great movie still. Nostalgic, fueled for sure. This is my jam. And I'm really curious to see, honestly, in my own merits, like, where this will rank amongst the franchise, because it was such a breath of fresh air this time particular, after, like I said, not expecting much from it this time, as I had such fatigue for this movie, that it was so grounded. Love that about it. Peace. Let me know what you guys think. Like, share, and subscribe. More Fast and Furious content coming at you soon.